My name is Harper, and I was 23 when I first moved to Pine Hollow, a sleepy town tucked about an hour north of my parents' place. I hadn't wanted to live in the city itself. They always said it was too noisy, too impersonal, so I picked somewhere smaller, quieter. Truthfully, I knew almost nothing about it before I arrived. My parents had assured me it was fine, that most towns around the city were harmless enough, and the apartments were cheap. Before then, I had been drifting from one odd job to another, never finding anything that really stuck. Once I'd unpacked the last box and made my little apartment vaguely feel like home, I started hunting for work. Money was tight, so I didn't have the luxury of being picky. The first listing that caught my eye was for a night stocking position at a small grocery store downtown. It wasn't a chain I'd ever heard of. Judging by the old sign and the faded paint, I guessed it was run by a single family. I had worked at a grocery store back in high school, so I figured my experience might give me a leg up. Barely an hour after submitting my application, my phone rang. The man on the other end said his name was Leo. His voice was calm, measured, almost too calm, and he wasted no time on pleasantries. A few quick questions, a brief mention of my schedule, and just like that, I was hired. No interview, no trial shift. I should have hesitated. There was something about the way he spoke, a certain stiffness in his tone, a precision in his words that felt off. The only catch was the night shift. I'd never worked nights before, and the thought made a small knot in my stomach. Still, I didn't have many options, so I said yes. My first night arrived 3 days later. I left my apartment around 9:30, my paperwork neatly tucked in a folder. The store closed at 9, so the parking lot was empty, the faint glow from the streetlights bouncing off the cracked asphalt. Even from the lot, the building felt wrong somehow. Dim lights flickered behind grimy windows, and the whole structure seemed older than anything in town. Leo was waiting at the front doors. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzzed head and a dense beard that made his smile seem strangely incongruent. He held the doors open for me, his expression unchanging, like he'd been expecting me. We walked through the store together on the way to the office. The aisles were narrow, dusty, and worn, the kind of place you half expect to creak apart if you lean on the shelves too hard. Not what I remembered from grocery stores back home. I tried to chalk it up to small-town quirks, though something about it made my skin prickle. In the office, as he processed my paperwork, Leo made small talk. At first, it was harmless, questions about why I'd moved to Pine Hollow, but it quickly slid into territory that made me uneasy. He asked if I lived alone, how I got here, whether anyone would be picking me up later. I kept my answers vague, feeling the tension build in the air. Through it all, he kept that same wide smile, stretching unnaturally across his face, a grin that felt too deliberate, too fixed. Finally, paperwork done, he led me to the aisle I would be stocking. He set down carts of boxes and left me there, alone. At first, the work was simple, almost mindless, and I lost myself in the motion. But it didn't take long to notice something off. It was only the two of us in the store, and Leo kept reappearing at the end of the aisle. Not just passing by, but lingering, watching me with that unsettling grin. Every time I glanced up, there he was, leaning slightly, head tilted, eyes fixed. And then, as soon as I looked directly at him, he'd vanish around a corner without a word. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that he was just monitoring a new employee. But the silence between us, the way he watched without speaking, gnawed at something inside me. By the end of the first hour, I realized I was already questioning whether I wanted to be there at all. Something about him, about this place, felt wrong, and I didn't know if I could shake it. Everything about that store felt wrong, like a quiet pulse of unease running just beneath the fluorescent lights. I tried to tell myself I'd make a judgment later, just survive this shift first. My senses were on high alert, every creak of the floorboards, every shadow between the aisles, setting my nerves on edge. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I noticed Leo again. He was at the far end of the aisle, watching me like a hawk. The moment I caught his gaze, he started moving toward me, that unnervingly wide smile stretched across his face. "What do you say we take a 15-minute break now?" he said, voice smooth as oil. "It's been a long night." I nodded, assuming we'd head to the break room, but I didn't realize he meant together. He led me past the checkout, through a dimly lit corridor, and out a heavy steel door at the back of the building. The delivery area. Beyond it was a small, cracked asphalt lot with a single car parked under a flickering light. I assumed it was his. But the instant we stepped outside, the engine roared, headlights cutting through the darkness, and the car peeled away down the road. Leo pulled a cigarette from his pocket and leaned against the cold brick wall, smoke curling into the chill night air. I froze, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to retreat to the break room and sit quietly with the sandwich I'd brought, but it was my first night. I felt trapped in that awkward obligation to seem cooperative, polite. So I stood there, stiff and tense, staring out past the lot toward the shadowed trees. The silence stretched unbearably. Leo didn't say a word. His eyes didn't leave me either. Then a car returned. Same make, same color. The one that had just disappeared moments before. It didn't drive past. It slowed, gliding directly toward us, headlights painting the wall in harsh, glaring light. I looked at Leo, trying to gauge if he noticed the oddness, the sheer impossibility of it. But his gaze stayed fixed on me, cold, indifferent, unnervingly calm. A knot formed in my stomach. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, that he was part of whatever was happening. Before the car even fully stopped, I bolted, slipping back through the steel door, running blindly through the dim warehouse toward the office. My bag, my wallet, my jacket, they were all gone, like they'd never existed. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions. I didn't stop. I sprinted toward the front, burst through the doors, and didn't look back until I reached a gas station a few miles down the road. I panted into the phone, hands shaking, getting them to call the police. Once I was safe, a small, foolish part of me whispered that maybe I'd overreacted, that it had all been a misunderstanding. That thought vanished the instant the officers arrived at the store. They questioned Leo and walked through the building, and to my disbelief, everything was exactly where I'd left it in the office. Bag, keys, jacket, perfectly intact. The car that had arrived never existed. And all the surveillance cameras worked, except the one behind the building, conveniently dead. The case went nowhere. I couldn't prove a thing. I didn't stick around to find out what might have happened next. I broke my lease, fled Pine Hollow, and camped at my parents' until I could get my footing again. I still don't know what Leo had planned that night, or why he tried to erase every trace of me. But I do know one thing. I didn't stick around to find out the hard way. And somehow, that fact was the only comfort I could cling to. Subscribe and I'll tell you another story the next time you're alone in the dark.